All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, let me say greetings. My name is Charles Woods. I'm the outreach coordinator here at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. And I bring you greetings from the Civil Rights Institute as well as the Alabama Coalition for Immigrant Justice. Tonight, we are having a community conversation, and that conversation is overcoming the racial stigma. Overcoming the racial stigma of HB56 and building the movement and continuing the resistance. Those of you that are not familiar with HB56, it is titled the Benson-Hammond Alabama Taxpayer and Citizen Protection Act. It is an anti-illegal immigration bill signed into law in the United States, in the state of Alabama in June of 2011, and is regarded as the nation's strictest anti-immigration law. So we have a panel who will conduct our discussion today. I'm going to ask for each person to introduce yourself and the organization that you represent. We're going to start at the end and work our way this way.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. It's great to see you, and thank you for coming. My name is Gwendolyn Ferretti, and I'm a social anthropologist working at the University of Texas at Austin, but I'm also affiliated to various immigrant organizations here in Alabama, including the Alabama the Alabama Coalition for Immigrant Justice, Adelante, Alabama Worker Center, and also have worked with the Hispanic Interest Coalition of Alabama.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bernard Simulton, and I'm the president of the Alabama State Conference of the NAACP, and glad to be here. And I've been working with ACIJ. Okay, I'm on the board of directors too, and I've been working with ACIJ since 2011.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Judith Zambrano. Vengo de la ciudad de Tuscaloosa. Soy miembro de la mesa directiva de la Coalición de Alabama por la Justicia de los Inmigrantes y estoy involucrada en muchos grupos de educación y de arte en Tuscaloosa. Gracias.
Good afternoon. My name is Fernanda Herrera. I'm a student at Stanford University. I'm an international relations, Latin American studies minor, studying pre-law as well. And I volunteer at Adelante, ACIJ, HICA, and various other organizations in the community.
Buenas tardes, soy Ángel Aldana. Yo soy un voluntario de Alabama Coalition for Immigrant Justice y también voluntario en Adelante. Y también soy un trabajador de la construcción.
All right. You all gonna have to bear with me. This is the first time I've ever done the interpretation before, so I'm kind of listening for the English and I'm listening to the Spanish as well, so bear with me. So also today is Dia de la Raza, and I would like each of the panelists, if you're familiar with Dia de la Raza, to explain to us what that means to you. We'll start with, tell me your name again, ma'am.
Me?
Yes, ma'am.
Gwendolyn Ferretti.
Gwendolyn. We'll start with Gwendolyn. Thank you.
Well, El Día de la Raza is the way that Latin America has characterized the colonization of Latin America, the Latin American hemisphere. In the U.S., it coincides with Christopher Columbus Day, and both characterizations are problematic and uplifting in different ways. Dia de la Raza alludes to the formation of the race, which is what La Raza refers to, and it alludes to the idea of mestizaje, which is racial miscegenation, which is the combining of, somewhat forcefully, of indigenous communities across the Latin American hemisphere that existed before colonization with the imposition of whiteness through Spanish conquest, and also mixing with black ancestry through enslaved peoples that were brought to the Americas to work, alongside with indigenous communities as they were subjugated to the benefit of the colony of Spain, or rather the mother of Spain, and we became the colonies eventually. So in some ways it's uplifting because the concept of la raza has been celebratory, as we are a new race that came out. It was a national project of thinking of ourselves as a new race, as the Bronze race, thinking of ourselves as a new people that came out of this mixing. But it's also a reminder of or sometimes can gloss over the fact that indigenous and black people still live and are active and are struggling within Latin America itself. But regardless of that, it's still how we refer to Columbus Day, because in some spaces we actively critique the quote-unquote discovery of Columbus, and but I think we can talk about that later.
Ditto. No, I just would like to emphasize, pick up on the points you talked about Christopher Columbus. Of course, when I was going to school, Christopher Columbus was a big day. Everybody celebrated that day. But as the saying goes, as you learn better, you do better. And, since I've become an adult, I realized that Christopher Columbus did not discover America. It was already here, long before Christopher came over. And so, I think those are some of the misconceptions that we are taught in college, in elementary school. And even today, it's still taught that way. But hopefully that, we'll get to the point where the real story comes out about, and no one doubts that Christopher Columbus did not sail across the ocean, but for the discovery, that's the concern that we have. And through education, we can learn the true history of our country and our nation.
I think for me, growing up, it was almost like a duality of sorts. That this day, my mom would always say, "Es el día de la raza, es el día de la raza," and then at school I would always hear Columbus Day. So I didn't know how to merge the two. So I think today I've learned to celebrate the duality of my personalities on this day. This year is the first year, though, that I understand the importance of my indigenous blood. I guess through taking part in these organizations and through learning about my identity and taking courses in Latin American studies and learning about the colonization of Mexico, I've come to understand just how intricate our roots are as a mestizo culture. And I don't know, last week we had Mr. Brian Stevenson from the Equal Justice Initiative come to our school and talk about how the United States is based on this bloodthirsty conquest. And that's where a lot of upheaval comes in our society. Not just brown injustice, but also black injustice. The black and brown unity stems from that upheaval of a culture in our country. And I think Dia de la Raza is a day to remember that.
Bueno, para mí Día de la Raza es el fin de una cultura y el principio de otra cultura. El mestizaje, los movimientos de personas por descubrir terrenos y por descubrir y extraer recursos que el mundo y la civilización necesita. Entonces, de eso vienen los descubrimientos. El Día de la Raza fue un descubrimiento según historia, pero en mi opinión América ya estaba descubierta. Simplemente para mí Cristóbal Colón se perdió porque él se perdió, no descubrió, no tenía ese propósito. Entonces, de eso viene el fin de una cultura. Como yo puedo hablar de mi cultura, de México, fin de la cultura azteca, pero el principio de una nueva cultura. Entonces, el hombre debe tener la capacidad de trabajar sobre esos problemas, trabajando unidos entre nuevos conquistadores y nuevos conquistados. Tenemos los mismos problemas ahorita, tenemos que tener esa capacidad de sobrevivir, seguir trabajando entre ellos. No lo tenemos que tomar como un día oscuro o un día malo, sino que tenemos que aprovechar ese movimiento y trabajar y seguir adelante, porque eso es lo que somos. La humanidad tiene que seguir trabajando. Gracias.
I thank you for your comments. Angel made a very good point about segueing in from one culture into another. So the question I want to ask now is, what is your all's concept of what an immigrant is? We hear that America is a land of immigrants, but it makes us forget about the indigenous population that was here before these immigrants came. So what is your understanding or your concept of what an immigrant is? We can start with you, Angel, por favor.
Bueno, para mí emigrante es persona que busca un nuevo porvenir. En mi opinión, yo puedo hablar de mi caso personal. Cuando el ser humano en cierta área nace y no puede sostenerse, o porque los recursos naturales están escasos, el ser humano tiene que emigrar, moverse de un lugar porque tiene que sobrevivir. En mi caso tuve que emigrar a los Estados Unidos porque lo indispensable para sostenerse no se encuentra a la mano. Pero esa es parte del ser humano, el parte del sobrevivir. Como vuelvo a repetir, tenemos que salir adelante a buscar la vida, a buscar los recursos naturales, y aunque las personas originales del terreno que vamos a tomar no sea bien visto entonces tenemos que luchar y decir que nosotros tenemos el privilegio o tenemos la libertad de escoger dónde vivir. Podemos escoger, nadie impide dónde puedes vivir tú. Tenemos esa libertad, ese privilegio, entonces debemos de trabajar y trabajar juntos para la tierra que sea tomada. No se crea un odio, sino tratar de entenderse entre culturas. Eso es lo que yo estoy haciendo aquí como inmigrante. Aquí en Alabama yo he tratado de convivir con la gente original de aquí. Es lento el proceso, pero sí es posible. Gracias.
I guess the skeleton definition of an immigrant is somebody who finds himself in a new environment for one reason or another. in various stages of my life, I've been an immigrant in a different environment. And I think when the choice to be an immigrant is taken from you because the place that you live in is so hostile, not conducive to prosperity, and you're in a way, you're like ripped from your homeland and you're taken somewhere else. I think the community where you find yourself is, I've been doing some research on this because I'm writing a paper on it soon, but it's almost like we think that the place that we come into has a certain obligation to welcome us, especially when the place that we go to is found on these tenets of you're welcome the weary, welcome the tired. So I think an immigrant is somebody who is just looking for a home.
Mi opinión de inmigrante es una persona que, ya sea por miedo, por hambre, por dolor o por circunstancias de la vida, nos vemos obligados a abandonar nuestros países, nuestra familia, y nos vemos enfrentados a conocer culturas nuevas que para nosotros es algo bien difícil. Yo personalmente vengo de un hogar con violencia doméstica y creo que el haber migrado fue lo mejor que pudo haber pasado en mi familia, porque creo que con eso se salvó la vida de mi madre. Entonces creo que ha valido la pena ser migrante y aprender tantas cosas nuevas en este país.
I would say in America, the Native American Indians and African Americans are probably the only folks that are not immigrants. You say, well, why do you say that? Well, of course, the Native Americans were already here. African Americans were brought here. We were not brought here of our own will. We were not seeking new homes, new opportunities. We were brought here under as a slave and made to live here, made to work here. And so if you look at a definition of immigrant, which is someone who's looking for a new opportunity, a new place to live, a new place to establish their roots, African Americans were not looking for that. And I'm not saying that, I regret, my ancestors being forced to come here, but as immigrant, most of the time is a person that's looking for, new opportunity to put down new roots, and you can immigrate from state to state, from community to community, as you move around. But in the true definition of the word, I think we're talking about people who move from another country to, in this case, the United States to live, or it could be vice versa. People go from the United States to other countries to live and to put down their roots.
Well, I would actually counter a little bit what you're saying. Not in that Native Americans and blacks are not immigrants, I agree. Native Americans are indigenous to this country. Blacks are a diaspora that as a result of a forced migration, in that sense of not willing. The enslavement of black people is something that gets camouflaged when we say that we are a nation of immigrants. But we also camouflage the fact that, in particular, when we talk about this country being a nation of immigrants, we're talking, the way that the discourse works is to highlight migration from Europe, and it camouflages the fact that particularly Mexicans and Mexican origin people are native to these lands. There are new migrations that, and so when we talk about Latin Americans or Latinos or Hispanics, if that's the term that you prefer, we're talking about a diverse community, and some of these are new migrants who have new histories and have chosen to come to the U.S. for sometimes positive reasons, sometimes negative reasons, but we can't let go of the fact that that mestizo Mexican communities are also indigenous to the United States, particularly to the Southwest, and that those lands were taken from Mexico by the U.S. given white settlements. It was because of Anglo settlements into what were native lands that spurred the Mexican-American War, as it's called here, and that spurred the eventual taking of these lands from the country of Mexico. And Mexicans were to become U.S. citizens under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and were denied citizenship because they did not fall under the requirement of whiteness that the United States required of its citizens. And so because of this, Mexican origin people have been perpetually characterized as being foreign when we're not. We have an innate right to be here. These lands were ours, so to speak, not necessarily my own personal history, but Chicano and Tejano communities have long lived in what is now the United States. And new migrant communities have a relationship to them, their different histories, but they're also ones that we need to not forget.
That's very well said. You said two terms that I'm not sure everyone is familiar with. You said Chicano, and what was the second phrase you used?
Tejano.
Tejano. Can you give us, us ignorant folks, a little bit of information on exactly what is the difference between Latino, Hispanic, Chicano, and what was the last one?
Tejano.
Tejano.
Sure.
I know that's kind of lengthy, but for those of us who don't know.
Yeah, well, Chicano communities Chicano is a term that was adopted by Mexican origin communities that lived in the Southwest and California region. In the 1960s, it surged as in parallel to the Black Power movement. It was as a result of the Brown Power movement that was linked to and in conversation with Black liberation is to discuss the innate right of brown people within the United States to challenge white supremacy and to reclaim rights that were denied to these communities as should have been authorized by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So Chicanos in the 60s had revolutionary movement. If you think of leaders like Roberto Tijerina, who took by arms a territory in New Mexico and defended it, claiming that they had title rights to those lands, and other leaders that came out in the 60s to advocate for brown beauty, brown power, brown liberation, as opposed to assimilating into whiteness. That is the history of Chicanidad, Chicano-ness. When we talk about Hispanic is a term that was issued was produced by the U.S. government as an ethnic category that was created to discuss people that had Iberian heritage. So that meant that peoples who were colonized by Spain. So Hispanic does not include, for example, Brazilians who were colonized by Portuguese. And so, arguably, there's debates about that. But so Hispanic was a government-issued term that has been imposed, and it's a term that is an ethnic category, but it's also one that has been racialized so that it's used as a racial category, even though Latin Americans can be racially white, black, multiracial, Native American, and et cetera, et cetera. And Latino is a term that has come out more recently, referring to Latin America, so people originating from countries of Latin America that are called Latinos. And Tejanos are like Chicanos, but from Texas. And they have a specific identity in compared to, but they are Mexican origin people from Texas.
Well, thank you for that. I'm originally from California myself, so I was familiar with Chicano, but not Tejano, so I thank you for your enlightening comments. Now, something else you said, talking about the treaty of, is it Guadalupe?
Guadalupe Hidalgo.
Okay. So the U.S. government has a history of not honoring treaties that they make with indigenous populations. And this law, the HB56 Alabama law, kind of falls into that same category. It reminds me of the vagrancy laws of the Jim Crow era that African Americans were that were passed to incarcerate them and to keep black people oppressed. And this law is similar in that light. So the question I want to ask is, why was it important to organize the Hispanic community against this law and to get the stronger points of the law repealed before it came into being? But why was it important to organize against HB 56? We can start with Angel, por favor.
Bueno, debido a la creación de la ley que criminalizaban al estar en este estado, se vio la necesidad de organizarse. ¿Por qué organizarse? Porque esta ley estaba completamente wrong. No violaba los derechos humanos. De principio criminalizaba el estar aquí, simplemente porque no tenías una identificación o porque venías de migrante. Entonces, nosotros como afectados tuvimos que organizarnos, y tal vez fue una oportunidad para hacerle saber al Estado que en algunas, como muestra de esto, hay muchas cosas que están violando, no simplemente en la comunidad latina o inmigrantes, sino hay otros problemas. Hablando en la comunidad original de aquí, como las minorías, no voy a especificar qué minorías, pero fue una oportunidad de nosotros para ver qué tanto estábamos unidos, para trabajar y hacerle saber a nuestros representantes o a los creadores de la ley que nosotros no somos criminales. Entonces tuvimos la oportunidad de triunfar, salir adelante. Tenemos muchas cosas por qué trabajar. Somos participantes del progreso de este país, participantes en la economía. En mi opinión personal, yo soy trabajador de la construcción y yo puedo opinar sobre cómo es que participamos en el movimiento económico. Yo tengo 15 años trabajando aquí en la construcción. puedo poner un ejemplo. Yo trabajo haciendo puentes. Durante 15 años he estado trabajando en varias partes del estado de Alabama. Entonces, me pregunto por qué, si nosotros como inmigrantes participamos en el crecimiento económico, ¿por qué no tenemos un derecho, por lo menos, de tener una identificación o un seguro social, una compensación, la palabra, compensar la mano de obra con algo? Entonces yo me pregunto a nuestros representantes, a nuestros legisladores, ¿por qué no un balance? Si nosotros damos algo para el progreso económico, ¿por qué ellos no nos dan algo? No simplemente la ayuda monetaria, sino también un derecho que nos hace mucha falta. Gracias.
So I wasn't organizing back when HB56 was in full fervor. So I can't speak to that, but I can speak to the personal and the financial burden that HB56 had on my family and on myself. I remember my parents had a restaurant when I was in the 6th grade, and it was doing really well, but then after the housing crash, it didn't do well. And so then they opened another one, and right as it was, peaking, it was just, we were just doing really well. Right as it was peaking, HB56 hit, and that was my junior year of high school. And so then after that, my parents were they were forced to sell, or not sell, but just close down. And then my dad had to go work at Pilgrim's Pride in Gunnersville in the chicken plant, and my mom had to work at a snow cone stand just to pay for just basic necessities. And I had just gotten DACA, so I was able to work at Books A Million to pay for the rent. So I think HB56 just rattled my life. It changed the way that I looked at everything. It kept my mom from letting me go to school for a week. My cousins would constantly text me and say, hey, there's hay un retén, right down the road. So it was, I think the importance of organizing during HB56 was evident just in my everyday life. And I know that if it hadn't been for all of these brave men and women and children who took time out of their busy days to march and to call and write to our legislators, I probably wouldn't be here today. And I know that a lot of that comes from, I guess that my gratitude definitely comes from the everyday, but a lot of our inabilities to organize and to get together and take time out of our work weeks is this systematic discrimination that makes it impossible for us to take time off from work, because how else are you going to be able to afford to feed your families and go to school and be somebody, just be somebody in society. So HB56 definitely impacted a lot of the people in this room, and it will continue to impact us, I think, because the more we're pushed into no, the more we're going to push into yes.
Cuando se estaba hablando de que iban a poner la ley HB56, fue cuando pasó el tornado. Muchísimas personas en mi comunidad dejaron de recibir ayuda por no tener documentos. Era muy triste ver personas que habían perdido toda una vida de trabajo en esos minutos que sucedió este desastre natural. A raíz de eso, en nuestra comunidad se formó un shelter para hispanos, de hispanos y para hispanos. en donde se empezó a ver toda la necesidad que había de las personas. Después de esto, como una de las partes que tocaba HB56 era respecto a la educación y que tenían que tener documentos los niños para estar en la escuela, hubo una llamada que recibimos muchas mamás de una persona que está aquí presente, Gwen, y que pues todas teníamos mucho miedo y ella nos dijo: tienen derechos, no se preocupen, vamos a luchar, vamos a buscar la forma de que no tengan problemas los niños, vamos a ver qué podemos hacer por ustedes. Después de eso, se supone que era un grupo de mujeres, de mamás con niños en la escuela, que teníamos mucho miedo, yo era una de ellas. Se terminó formando el grupo que es de Tuscaloosa, y empezaron a ver desde manifestaciones en contra de la ley, tuvimos jornadas de oración. Había una manta que siempre me gustó mucho, que decía: ama a tu vecino como a ti mismo. Aunque todos los vecinos nos odiaban en ese momento, nos miraban feo, había muchas personas que nos acompañaron en esas vigilias de oración. Eran tan bonitas, era sentir el apoyo dentro de todo el miedo que teníamos. Poco a poco fuimos conociendo más personas que estaban empezando a levantarse, enseñando a la gente que tenían derechos, que había formas de que la ley no nos afectara. Obviamente el ver familias separadas por la ley, porque yo tengo muchos conocidos que principalmente el papá fue deportado y dejó a los niños y a la esposa, aparte de todo, con muchas deudas, porque estar detenido implica gastos. Entonces, perdón, no lo sé. Cuando las personas se nos acercaban a pedirnos apoyo, a pesar de que nosotros mismos teníamos miedo, buscábamos formas para ayudarles. Yo hice mis documentos para que alguien pudiera hacerse cargo de mis hijas en caso de que a mí me detuvieran, y ha sido una de las experiencias más difíciles, porque una de mis hijas terminó en más de 2 ocasiones internada por ataques de pánico como consecuencia de este miedo que generaba el pensar que ya no íbamos a llegar papá o yo a casa. Pero ahora les puedo decir que ya no tengo miedo, estoy muy fuerte y muy entusiasmada de que hay tanta gente que nos apoya, de todos, no estoy hablando solo hispanos, estoy hablando de todas las comunidades que hay aquí, que hemos recibido mucho apoyo. Eso es todo.
HB56, I characterize it as, Alabama mean and nasty immigration law. All the southern states in particular were passing some type of immigration laws during that time, and Alabama tried to make theirs more tougher than any of the other states. And part of the problem is the United States does not have a fair immigration policy. And that's something that, our Congress needs to work on, our leaders need to work on, to develop a fair immigration policy that's fair to all people. I've heard stories that, the length of time as well as the amount of money it takes to, get your citizenship, it's almost cost prohibitive, and, going forward, the United States will have to develop a fair and immigration policy. Now, the NAACP, always stands for justice and equality. It's an organization that was founded on equality and justice for all people, regardless of your nationality, regardless of background. And we have, when HB56 was signed and went into effect, I think our first meeting was in Huntsville with the local Hispanic Latino community, and a very good conversation took place, but there were a lot of questions, a lot of concern, fears over people of what was going to happen. And of course, we didn't have the answers, and I don't think anyone really had the answers. But I know what Alabama, what their policy was. They wanted to, deport and put fear in people. And but the Hispanic Latino community, of course, is the fastest growing community in the United States. And on a national level, there's fear that, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, the white majority will no longer be the white majority. And that's there's fear as to what's going to happen to our country, in some people's mind, as to what's going to happen to our country. I think it's clear to say that, whoever's in leadership, our nation will survive and become stronger because it was founded on, it's the melting pot. People from all across the world can come to the United States and practice freedom of speech, freedom of religion, any other freedom that they want to. And that's one thing that makes the United States strong, because of our Constitution. And we just need to make sure that that our Constitution is enforced, and in terms of religious freedom, any other kind of freedom that is guaranteed under our Constitution.
So when you ask why it's important to organize against HB56, I think it's important because just because something is the law doesn't make it right. Slavery was legal. The Holocaust was legal. The genocide of Native American peoples was considered legal. So legality does not equal justice, does not equal right. Immigration, even unauthorized immigration, is not a crime, but it is being made a crime more and more every day. It's an infraction. It's a civil, it's a civil, Yes, it's a civil misdemeanor. It's a civil issue. It's not a criminal issue. But what we see with laws like HB56 is that we are trying to make migration a criminal issue. And the reason why we're making it is because it benefits certain people, certain corporations, and it benefits the maintenance of white supremacy. HB56 and in Alabama was an anti-immigrant law that was made to control and push down what was a very small population in real numbers, but Alabama had the third largest, fastest growing Latino population in the country at the time. So what we see is a reaction to the growth, to the potential growth of Latino communities, and a fear, a gut instinct, a fear of a browning of the country. Today, Latinos are the largest minority in the United States, and by 2060, the United States will be a quote-unquote minority-majority nation. And what we see through laws like HB56, through the discourses that have come out in today's election, is we see a response to, we see this gut reaction to the fear that the status quo, that white supremacy will be defeated because whites will become a minority. And this is something that we see in how Alabama legislators discussed immigration, because to discuss immigration in Alabama was to talk about Latinos. Even though the issue of the supposed problem of illegal immigration is not something that is necessarily limited to Latinos. There are migrants from all over the world, but the ones that we care about are the ones that are brown and the ones that come from the global south. Even though the fact is that migration to the United States is a consequence of the United States' own foreign policies and the disenfranchisement and destabilizing of national economies abroad. So it's a hypocritical act to destroy someone's economy and to intentionally subdue global South nations from becoming independent and then criminalize the people when they do leave. So here in Alabama, we saw the making of the scapegoating of all of the problems of the state and onto the growing Latino communities that live here. And we saw a moment where, and we still are seeing a moment where we feel entitled to say, you don't belong, without knowing anything about the history or caring to understand the complexity of the issue. But HB56 also brought out a moment of passionate resistance and bravery by the people that were being scapegoated. And so I'm thankful to the law for that, but it's still a struggle that's not finished.
All right, thank you for that. Just a housekeeping situation. My interpreters, could one of you please grab that microphone over there? I received a text from a colleague who was watching us live on YouTube, and he's saying that he can't hear the interpretations when it's coming across because they're not speaking into the mic. So we can hear it in our headphones, but the people on our YouTube live streaming can't turn it on. Okay, try it now. Okay.
Hello. All right. Okay. Then.
But yeah,
it's going to be broadcast, the interpretation.
So
you won't be able to hear the speaker.
So you'll be able to hear the interpreter, but not the speaker itself.
Well, unless you turn off the mic of the speaker. Yeah.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Let's try it and see, because if they hear the person speaking into the mic, the problem is that it's happening simultaneously, and that they'll be able to hear one but not the other, or we're going to flood each other out, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're going to hear both, but
at the same time, right? So it's going to be jumbled, and right. Yeah, we're going to try it one time, and then we'll, if it seems like it's going to be a problem, we won't worry about it. Appreciate it. So moving on. Okay, question. Well, first, I want Fernanda, would you mind giving us some of your experiences as a congressional intern? and some of the work that you've done doing that. Please, thank you.
I interned this summer with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute with 37 other Latinas from across the country. Only 8 of us were undocumented. So I think in that experience, like, I'd never really been around as many people who are my age and are also going to college and experience the same experiences that I did growing up. So this summer I was interning with Congressman Grijalva from Arizona, and I learned a lot about indigenous tribes and a lot about how the climate in Arizona was receptive to their HB56, so their 1070. And so it was very interesting to me to see the 2 different climates and the different dynamics that came after those anti-immigration bills. So this summer I was basically just at the front desk for a lot of the time. I was able to have a lot of mobility, so I went to different briefings. I did a lot with immigration and with the refugees. So whenever there was a briefing on immigration or refugees, a lot of women's health issues, and some of the children immigration, I would go to the briefings and write memorandums on them and hand them to the legislative director that was in charge of that. A lot of the other things that I did was like bridge building with other interns. So I was able to meet a lot of people from across the country and learn from them and learn how situations for immigrants are in their states and at their universities especially. So I brought back a lot of that knowledge to my university and have worked at the beginning of this semester to implement some of their more welcoming strategies for Latino students on their campuses. We also, I think one of the most poignant parts of my internship was something that was outside of the internship itself, but it was the Supreme Court non-decision in late June. And so a lot of the allies that were within CHCI's internship program, and then the 8 of us who were undocumented, we went outside of the Supreme Court and we did a silent demonstration the day that happened in the Supreme Court. Telemundo came by, I think Univision also did a segment on it, and a few other news organizations got it too, but that wasn't our intention. We wanted to do something because we felt powerless. We felt like we couldn't do anything. We were sitting in those hallways listening to legislation getting passed above our heads on C-SPAN, and we just knew that we literally could do nothing. And the 8 of us who were undocumented knew that we would never be in those halls ever again because we can't work in Congress unless we're citizens. So I think being there this summer with Pulse, with the non-decision and the killings, the massacres that were happening with the Black Lives Matter movements, it was a time for me and for the 37 others for us to just come awake and understand that we can't just sit here. We can't just graduate college and get a job and sit at our desk. We have to do something. We have to become active and talk, communicate.
From your experiences, did you see that from the other states? Were the people going through the same things that the Latino community was going through here in Alabama and other states as well?
Okay, so I was the only one from Alabama in the program, and I came in with this chip on my shoulder that we all share in here. Woe is me, HB56, I'm an immigrant in Alabama, they had the civil rights movement, So I already came in with that knowledge that a lot of the people that were going to be there with me weren't going to share these experiences. And my first night there, actually, I met a girl from California. And she was just so distraught with how the situation was for Latinos in California. And I looked at her and I was like, are you serious? I'm from Alabama. But then we sat down and we talked about it, and I realized that it's everywhere. It's the whole entire United States. We're all being targeted. And the best thing that we can do is learn about how we're combating this. We're starting, and here in Alabama, we're starting where California was, 40 years ago. But from what I think, our morale is strides ahead, because we're coasting on this new wave of excitement, of mobility, of organizing, of working against the status quo almost. So yeah, I think it was very important for me to have that experience and for me to be able to learn from other people from other states.
Thank you. With this law comes a stigma about how immigrants contribute to our society or lack thereof. And a lot of Americans feel that immigrants are coming and taking jobs that Americans could have, and that it's raising the unemployment rate for citizens of this country and things of that sort. So I just want to know, what do you all feel or have to say about the American attitude that immigrants are coming to America to steal jobs from Americans? Would anybody want to speak on that? Unhip, maybe?
I'll give it a shot. Again, as I said earlier, America is a melting pot, and while it has a finite number of jobs, opportunities, I don't see the immigrants coming in, taking jobs taking the jobs away from the ordinary American citizen, I should say, I guess. I think it's, if they were allowed to pay taxes and things like that, that would create a lot more funds to create more jobs.
Exactly.
So, because a lot of the immigrants, and I'm talking about black as well as Latino and any other, well, primarily I say black and then Latino, they work and don't pay taxes, not that they don't want to, but because it's the way the law is structured. You don't pay taxes because we don't know who you are, and you get paid in cash a lot of time. So I think that's why I think America needs to adopt a immigration policy that is fair and above board, that you come here and you pay your fair share. And so I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Any immigrants would disagree with that. But again, because of our laws, a lot of people don't pay it, but I don't think that the jobs that are taken by immigrants are being taken away from, other folks.
All right, anybody else want to speak on that? Nobody?
Yo pienso que latinos o inmigrantes no roban los empleos. La simple razón porque para todos existe la oportunidad de trabajar. El que el patrón o nuestro manager es el que decide quién se queda y quién está. Los Estados Unidos, por eso somos, me incluyo, los número uno, porque escogen calidad, y lo importante es trabajar y sacar el trabajo adelante. Respetamos que personas no quieran trabajar, pero eso se manifiesta como que, porque un latino se queda a trabajar, entonces le está quitando el trabajo a otra persona. pero no es cierto porque tal vez nosotros los latinos o inmigrantes tenemos como un doble responsabilidad de salir adelante, porque venimos de un país que no nos presta las oportunidades que hay aquí y nosotros las aprovechamos. No creo que se roben los empleos porque yo pienso que es mal interpretado que se roben los empleos, pero yo pienso que como personas que no quieren trabajar es porque es una opción. Ellos actúan, ellos quieren no trabajar y es respetable. Cada quien decide por su propia vida. Nosotros respetamos que se vea mal que tal vez no quieran trabajar, pero pues vuelvo a lo mismo, es respetable. Y gracias.
All right, anybody else have anything to say on that? No? All right. So at this time, I'd like to ask the audience, do they have any questions for our panelists? Yes, ma'am.
Los niños los niños que fueron separados de sus papás, bueno, del papá, continúan aquí, pero ha sido muy difícil adaptarse a no tener tanto al papá como el apoyo económico que ellos recibían, y específicamente a uno de los papás lo detuvieron una mañana cuando iba a llevar al niño al kinder. Entonces llegaron los policías y delante del niño le quitaron al papá lo que era el cinturón, la cartera, lo esposaron y se lo llevaron. Y el niño hasta hoy ve a un policía y llora. Y estoy hablando que pasó hace 3 años ya.
Did you mean immigrant children being separated from their parents here that already reside here, or are you talking about the crisis of Central American children coming in? Okay. So in that regard, so there was a crisis of Central American children coming, unaccompanied minors, being seen crossing into the United States after 2012, so peaked in 2013. Many of those children were apprehended, well, the ones that we know of who were apprehended by Border Patrol or other ICE, Immigration and Customs and Enforcement agency, they were either placed into in detention centers, or eventually, if they could, be transferred into the custody of extended family, if that family already resided within the U.S. Some of them were put through, but eventually all of these children have to go through immigration court to face deportation proceedings, and there have been a lot of grievances to how these children are being treated. So, for example, I've read of cases where toddlers have been considered to self-represent because precisely immigration is not a criminal issue. Immigrants in deportation proceedings don't have the right to counsel. to counsel provided by the state. So if the person cannot afford representation, they're not issued or given a representation. So that means that minors have had to represent themselves in court in their deportation proceedings. And these are children who do many times have legitimate cases of to be able to be granted refugee status. But if you ask a 3-year-old, do you have an inherent fear of returning to your country? Will you face death? That 3-year-old is going to say, I want peas or I want potato chips. It's not going to be able to defend him or herself in court. So a lot of these cases, if they were not automatically repatriated, they're probably in either in extended foster care system or staying with extended relatives facing deportation proceedings eventually.
So what it sounds like is that the law and the immigration policy across the nation itself is just broken, and they really don't have a understanding on how to deal with these individuals who are just trying to find and make a better life for themselves by coming to America, which many people refer to as the greatest country in the world. So along those lines, I'm going to ask Mr. Bernard, what is the NAACP's role in supporting the Alabama Coalition for Immigrant Justice? And why is it important to build relationships between the Latino community and black communities?
Well, I think it's obvious that we face some of the same issues in both communities. There's discrimination on both sides of the coin. Whether you're Latino, whether you're African American, you still face discrimination. Whether you're documented or undocumented, you still face discrimination. When you drive down this road, you get this weird look from the police. So we face some common issues among our communities, and that's why I always say it's good for us to band together to work towards some common goals, to work towards voting together, to work towards seeking equality and justice for both communities. The NAACP has was with what's the gentleman in California during the migrant workers?
Cesar Chavez.
Cesar Chavez, with him back during that time, and of course they supported us. So, going forward, we face some of the same issues, and as the even ACIJ has come to us and asked, about how African American survived during the civil rights movement, and so we share some common interests, and I think working together we can achieve much. And I think if you look at the rhetoric that's being spread during the election that's happening now, one person has talked about Hispanic, they talked about Black, Muslim, women, and all these things. And so, and you ask yourself a question, is that the person you want to lead this nation in the future? So I don't think so. So that's why we need to go out and vote.
I agree.
I'm not telling you who to vote for, but because NAACP is nonpartisan.
So is Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Yes, ma'am. Okay. So if I understand you correctly, your question is, how has the Latino community been able to pay for or how they've been affected financially with?
No.
Right.
I mean, applying to enter the country is in itself prohibitory. You have to go through things like paying for fees to file for permission to get a visa. You have to show credit reports. You have to show that you own property to be able to file for visas to enter the United States. So those kinds of costs are prohibitory for people to apply to come, quote unquote, legally. It is expensive to be smuggled into the country. It is a cost of upwards to $6,000 for families for one person to cross into the United States. That person then becomes indebted to the smuggler. Those debts are handled usually collectively between families and extended kin. Then being in the U.S., you face incredible economic costs. Taxes are deducted from your wages, but you never see benefits because you don't have a valid Social Security number. You're working with an ITIN number, which is a tax identification number, or with a fake Social Security number, so you never see that money that is deducted from your wages ever given back to you. You are prohibited from applying for things like Affordable Health Care Act. So you're not eligible for those sorts of things. So you have to pay for your health care out of pocket without any insurance. Many insurance companies won't take you on because you don't have a valid Social Security number. If you get arrested, you have to pay fines and post bail, both for whatever charge you were arrested for and for immigration bonds and immigration court costs. So for example, if you get arrested for driving without a license, you will be charged for driving without a license. You'll have to pay for that. And then if you get referred to ICE custody, you'll then have to pay an immigration bond to be able to get out of immigration custody. And that bond can start from a minimum of $2,500 for a non-criminal alien. But of course, whatever a crime could be perceived, basically to determine risk. So I've had people who were, for example, one person was arrested and had to pay a $10,000 bond to be released from immigration custody. And then on top of that, having to pay for your own attorney to represent you for the purposes of going through immigration deportation proceedings. So yeah, it's very cost prohibitive.
Can you also speak on some of the predatory American lawyers and other professions who, excuse me, who prey on the Latino community, trying to show that they're helping people when in actuality they're taking people's money and kind of running with it? Do you all get that situation come up quite often?
Yeah, so whenever there's I know recently, like even a month or so ago, there was talk about a new law that you could just apply for, and if you've been here for 10 years and you have a U.S. citizen child, you could become a citizen. And there are a lot of firms who will begin paperwork for this. Actually, I know back when I was in high school, there was an attorney based out of California that, like, if you say that you're an asylee, you're granted a work permit, right? And so then you can work legally in the United States. And I had some family who decided to do that and faced deportation proceedings. So, I mean, that's just, it costs probably close to like 15 grand, and then even then they would have had to swear under oath, and that would have been completely illegal. They would have been deported, and so that's why they were put in deportation proceedings. So, yeah, it's definitely a lot of notaries. They will say that they're representing you legally when they have no power to do so. There's the language barrier as well, which makes it very difficult to communicate effectively. And I think that can all be mitigated by getting involved in the community. I think a lot of the people in this room know the people they go to, they know the resources, they know who to refer our friends and family to. So anybody, I think to answer your question, anybody who you know that would be in trouble, you can refer them to HICA, ACIJ, Adelante. Once they get involved in the community and they're invested in contributing to the rest of society, I mean, I don't know anybody in this room that wouldn't put their hands in the fire for them. I think that's what we are. That's what we do.
Let me add, just there are a number of organizations out there, as well as attorneys that are sympathetic and will represent different individuals, pro bono in some cases, reduce rates. But there are certainly a lot of organizations that contribute money, maybe not to pay for a person's bond, but to help organizers organize communities and develop resources that can be referred to, as you explained.
All right, so I heard HICA and ACIJ as organizations that you can refer people to. Yes, ma'am. Right here, and then we'll get you next. Thank you for that, ma'am.
I want to thank everybody for coming. These glasses were needed one. And as Myra was just talking about the reality, one of the two things came to mind, and I'd like to hear your views on it, is that folks do have opinions, and it doesn't matter what we say. They will not. It helps to hear it come from the voice of a person experiencing it. So thank you for all the undocumented immigrants who have taken the step to speak publicly, because that's a risk. But there's still people who refuse to hear what they're saying. And that's and this drives so much of this. And again, I just want to thank all the people of color who are still going out there every day and putting themselves in the line of all kinds of consequences.
So that's a good segue into what would you all like to see ultimately come about from this bill and any of the other discriminatory immigrant bills that are going around the country? What's the ultimate goal for our immigrant population in this country in regards to how the society and the laws have embraced them, I guess you can say? Does that make sense? So what would y'all like to see? What's the ultimate goal? What's the end goal for all of the organizing around this bill?
I think, I don't know exactly what it looked like, but it has to be a immigration law that has a path to citizenship. Mm-hmm. You hear the number 11 million. I don't know if that's right or wrong, what is 11 million or 1 million, or something in between. It has to have a path to citizenship. And because I think deportation of 11 million people is not an option. It's just not an option. It's not feasible that you're going to put 11 million people on a plane and fly them
not cost
wherever.
effective either.
Right. And so there has to be an immigration law that leads to a path for citizenship for those who are in the country. And so if some may want to go back to that country, and if they do, then, work it out where they can go back. Mm-hmm. For people who want to come to the country, we need to have a law that's fair, and it's not geared just towards, people of the lighter hue. It must be even for people from Haiti, people like that who get turned away a lot of time because of color of their skin. Right. And so the immigration law must be fair to all people and not just one particular segment of our society.
Anybody else want to elaborate on that?
In addition to the immigration law, I would also like to see more representation of Latinos in the higher echelons of society. So I would like to see more Latinos hired at universities as professors, as administrators, as even recruiters. Just that's basic. I would also like to see more representation as council members, senators, governors, congressmen, and women, because if we do account for as large of a part of the population as we do now, and we will in the future, we're constantly going to have people speaking on our behalf who have never experienced what we've experienced. And even though empathy is very, very great, I think there are a lot of empathetic congressmen and women who are not Latino but can advocate for us. It's not the same. It's not the same growing up, being 5 years old and thinking, I want to be president of the United States, and knowing that there's not a precedent for it, knowing that there's never been a Latina in the White House, even though we've been here since the beginning. So yeah, I would like to see more representation in higher parts of society.
So we're at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, and I think it would be a gross mischaracterization if I said that the civil rights movement was just about rights. I don't think it was just about getting the right to vote, right? It was about being recognized as a human being, right? People holding I am a man, right? It was about liberation, black liberation. And in a similar, although not the same way, the immigrant justice movement is a movement that begins at a discussion about talking about rights, but we also are talking about about the liberation of a community of people, and it is a racialized struggle. So we're when we talk about immigrant justice, it's not just about getting rights to become citizens, but also to better our conditions, to choose whether or not we want to come, because some people have migrated and really miss being home. Some people have made this their home and should have a right to be able to be treated with dignity as a human being. And so in that way, I think what I would like to see out of the movement that came out of HB56 and that has been in movement already is towards liberation. I think that that's a better goal.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? You said towards
liberation.
Liberation. All right. My phone is dead because anybody give me the time. I'm lost on my time now.
7:31.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Let me see. Let me ask this question, and then I'm gonna ask Ms. Sarai Portillo. Say that right this time? It's okay. To come up and tell us what ACIJ is doing and how people could be involved. But before you come up, I want to ask this question. How do you all think Alabama should have dealt with their immigrant population? Because we see that this law, this anti-immigrant bill that was passed is discriminatory, it is unfair on multiple levels, but the fact of the matter is that there are undocumented immigrants in this state, in this country. But in the state of Alabama, how do you think Alabama should have dealt with this issue? And that's for anyone who wants to answer.
I'll take a stab at it. I think it's been said several times that immigration is a federal issue. It's not a state issue. And that's not to say that states should not have a stake in it. But, states should work with the federal government to develop policy. Now, since we have what we have here in Alabama, first of all, I don't think the state should have passed it, should not even come up. But, since it did and since it passed, I think the state of Alabama should be a person that, kind of state that will realize that they've made a mistake and said, we're going to follow the federal guidelines.
Anybody else? No? All right, so at this point, we'll have Ms. Sarai Portillo. There you go. See, I'm learning.
So, hi everybody. Good night. Good evening, right? Well, right now, my name is Sarai Portillo. I'm the executive director for the coalition, the Alabama Coalition for Immigrant Justice, and definitely we are really active since HB56, but also we've been a little bit like vigilant of what this law is about, right? Because as you know, the law is still in effect. In 2011, it was like a really fear going on in our communities, but little by little with the fight of the leaders across this table, we were able to, at least defeat the worst pieces of the law. But that doesn't mean that we're still living on this law, right? Currently, we are doing this civic engagement campaign. The main goal of this campaign is to register voters as much as we can. Our goal is 600 in the entire state. So far, we have 500, and we started on the summer, like in July. So we know that is really crucial to just not fight for rights or human rights, but also have an active participation, a civic participation in these elections. Our future literally depends on these elections, right? Many of our leaders have been participating also in making voter registrations, and with the work of leaders like Angel, Judith, we've been able to statewide so far have like a little bit more than 500. We also know that the fight is not over, right? We are also thinking that long term, we need to have a tangible, outcome of while we're fighting for a law, right? Like an immigrant law that we anticipate is not going to be that easy, like it hasn't been in the last few years. But we are going to be looking for a driver license for the state of Alabama. It's not going to be easy, but we're anticipating that it's going to be a long-term fight. So we're looking over that too, right? So in 2011, people were dreaming about defeating these pieces of the law, and we were able to do it. So I think it's not that difficult to be dreaming about having a driver license for a state like the state of Alabama. But I think there were efforts, if I'm not mistaken, Helen can tell me, Helen Rivas, like in 2002, there were like some efforts already, making some progress on making a driver license for the state of Alabama. So that's another piece that we are also working towards, right? But also, one of other pieces that we're working is building alliances. Like Bernard said, building alliances with the African American community is being key for us to be really working against this law, and that's one of our crucial pieces of work. We also are building alliances with other, there were mentions with Adelante, the Adelante Alabama Worker Center, in this campaign, the Shutdown Etowah. So that's another campaign that we are really invested in fighting against. So, and most recently, the crisis, you may hear about the governor saying that the children are not welcome in the state, right? So what we're gonna be doing about this, right? There's children coming up to the state anyhow. So I guess we also trying to figure out what to do about this crisis. As somebody says early on, there's so few resources, for this fight. And we are a statewide coalition, and we are made of 4 people as full staff members who are trying to, work so many issues across the state, but also we have an amazing leadership who's stepping up and also doing the work that, accompany is supported by the staff. So that's pretty much how we organize ourselves, and we really can, with your support, like showing up for events like these ones. But also, it's not going to be the last time that you're going to be hearing from us. So hoping that we keep collaborating with the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute to have this type of talks, and obviously, thanks for the leaders who participated on this panel, because without them, definitely the coalition is not existing, right? Thank you. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, right now, what it separates from having citizenship is a social security number, right? That's the way that I'm seeing it. Maybe somebody else can have a different opinion, but in my personal case, right, I have to wait 5 years to become a resident first. And then after become a resident, I was waiting a little bit more than 5 years to then make the process to become a citizen, right? So, but I came through a student stash visa when I entered to this country in 2003, but I wait like 10 years until I finally decide, well, it's a piece of paper that I may need to, start like looking for to be able to don't be targeted, and also because of the work that I do, definitely is something that, it could help, right? But I guess it's just the complexity of the law in the United States that is just by case-to-case basis how you can become a resident or become a citizen after you become a resident. So it's definitely a more complex issue than just, having a definition of what citizenship means, right? Because for me, everybody in this room is a citizen, right? It's just how the law is, has been set up in this country in particular for you to don't feel like a full person, right? So I don't know if somebody else have another opinion in regards of what that means, citizenship, or the requirements to become a citizenship. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it depends on her case, in her own case. But personally speaking about personal experience, I couldn't leave the country until I got my residency, because otherwise, I have to start all over, or I will lose in the process of my case. So I guess that's why so hard to have a reforms, on a federal level, because there's so many of complexities behind it. So, anyone else over here?
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am. I agree. All right. So any closing remarks from anyone? No? What time do we have? You good? All right, so I want to, excuse me. I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. You all could have been anywhere, but you all chose to spend your time with us having this community conversation, this discussion about this anti-immigrant law. One thing I will ask the panelists to comment on, if you could, is what can we do to continue the resistance against not only this bill, federally, anti-immigrant bills, but what can we do to keep this going, to keep this conversation going, moving in a positive direction? Anyone?
I would just say talking to your peers, to the people that are around you, and bringing like the issue, staying current on the news, yeah, and just continuing to volunteer and go to events like this. I think if you even just go to a few of the community events, I think you'll learn a lot about how we function as a culture. And I think that's the first step towards humanizing the issue, is understanding the culture and seeing the vibrancy that we bring to this country.
I agree. Knowledge is the key. Anyone else? Final remarks.
También seguir buscando personas que sean nuestra voz, más aliados, educándonos y buscando, porque por ahí dicen que el que no habla, Dios no lo escucha.
Very good. Any other questions? Any final comments? No? Well, I thank you all very much for coming out tonight. I hope everyone gets home safely. Thank you. Oh, yes. Please, before you leave, we have a sign-in sheet in the back, and we have a survey for you all to take in regards to this conversation. I will pass those out now. Thank you. Oh, that's right. Also, if you want to partake in some authentic Latino cuisine, we will have like a after party at the office of the ACIJ, which is located in the HICA building. You can tell the address.
It's 117 South Crest Drive, Suite 202. So we're gonna be having Mexican dinner. So I hope everybody can join us. Thank you.
Don't say that.